I would like to thank everybody for coming and listening to another CBC, Canadian Blockchain Consortium presentation. And this one is going to be building operational resilience in Canadian blockchain companies, how to prepare and emerge for stronger disruption. My name is Jade Alberts, the founder of Peer Guidance. I am the marketing chair of the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, and we are extremely excited today to get this going. There is a few complications, but you know what? We are here. And I want to give a little introduction about the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, but we are emerging from provinces, thriving technology community, and the Canadian Blockchain Consortium has been a force in education, advancing event creation for blockchain applications and companies. The success of this organization has led to the opportunity to take us to a national scope, and the CBC will represent this unique sector. We're starting to be recognized across the world with the British Blockchain Consortium. We'll be speaking there, our Executive Director, Kalea, on June 17th. So there are a lot of exciting things coming up here in the future. Of course, none of this happens without our sponsors, and they were all over here from the top left corner to CBC to the Canadian Blockchain Association for Women in the bottom right corner. So thank you to all our sponsors. We couldn't do it without you. And of course, this chat is going to be sponsored by Deloitte, and we are extremely happy that they're a silver sponsor of us. And Deloitte is the brand under with tens of thousands of dedicated professionals in independent firms throughout the world collaborate to provide audit, consulting, financial advisory, risk management, tax, and related services to select clients. So thank you again, Deloitte. We have a live poll that we are going to be doing that are going to be engaging with us. So throughout this conversation, we'll be popping it out there. Please engage with us. If you have any questions, also put them in the chat. We will have a little Q&A at the end. Of course, follow us on all of our social media channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We are all there. And anything that you want to do, we are on our website at www.canadianblockchain.com. So please check us out there. Sign us up for our magazine, which I'm going to talk about now. We just released our June magazine. This is our 4th rendition. You find a lot of information there. It is great. So I won't tell you how great it is anymore, but please go to our website and just click on the magazine tab and you'll be able to download them from there. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Janine Moyer. She's a national digital assurance leader for Deloitte Canada. She also sits on the board of the Canadian Blockchain Consortium. So from here, I will say, Janine, welcome. Stephanie, welcome. And you guys can take it from here.
Thank you, Jade. I just wanted to check, because I haven't done one of these live on Facebook before. Is it also being recorded for the posting later on our website as well?
Absolutely. It will be here.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. All right. Do you mind going ahead to the next page there, Jade? Awesome. So before we start, Steph, I want to pass it over to you, and we want to explain why JF isn't here yet, but I think it's important to talk about why, because the topic we're actually talking about. So please go ahead.
No worries. And thank you all. If you can move to the next page. Thank you all for having us here today. My name is Stephanie Ruijs, and one of the co-leads of our national crisis and resilience practice here in Canada. And I was going to facilitate this with our full national lead, Jean-François Allard. But as we are working on crisis and resilience, so business continuity, but also disaster recovery and crisis management, one of our key work that we are doing for clients is incident response. So as soon as there's a crisis at a client, we can be on a 24/7 call and we can help them through a crisis. And currently, Jean-François is in the middle of a crisis that he needs to help the client on right now. So he will join as soon as he can during the session, but I will make sure that I will facilitate the full meeting today. And when he can join, he will contribute to giving also his perspectives on everything we want to share with you today on resilience, and then focusing specifically on business continuity and what is coming your way over the next few months. So my apologies on his behalf that he's not here. But yeah, that's part of our day-to-day job, where you really need to jump into a crisis and totally change everything around to make sure that that any organization can continue their business as usual, but also to respond to the crisis with the right communication. And then I'm his business continuity at this point. So hopefully you're okay with me making sure that you get all the information that you need during the next 90 minutes. But Janine, do you want to start to do an introduction for yourself?
Yeah, you bet. I know Jade introduced me a little bit at the beginning here, but background for me when it comes to the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, have been involved since we were just the Alberta Blockchain Consortium and have stayed with the group to take us national. So it's a wonderful organization, and it brings together people from across the country in the digital assets and blockchain space. So happy to be a part of that. As well, at Deloitte, I lead our digital assurance team, which lots of you follow me on LinkedIn, so you probably already know what that might be. I'm a fairly prolific poster, but I really focus on, blockchain and cryptocurrency type companies and helping them, with their financial reporting, meeting requirements, all that sort of thing, including helping them get ready for regulation. So, Jade, can I get you to go to the next page, please, on that note? So why would crypto companies even honestly care about this topic that we are discussing today? And one of the reasons would be is many of you in the space, if you are a crypto asset platform, as defined within IIROC CSA notice that came out on March 29th of this year, you have to get IIROC regulated within 2 years, which I know you're all aware. But as a part of that, IIROC could ask you to provide a comfort letter on your business continuity plan. So that's how it ties in with what Steph is going to talk about a lot today, which is, hey, now you gotta get regulated. Guess what? There's a whole lot that goes with being regulated. So I just want to point you back to the session that you can see on the laptop here, which was, I think, 1 or 2 sessions ago, where CBC and the team on the screen went through what does that staff notice mean. This part was not included in that discussion, but just so you know, this is a follow-on of what can be requested from you by IIROC. So with that, can we head over to the next slide, please, Jade? Over to you, Steph.
And thank you. So before I start, please make sure that if you have any questions, list them in the chat. Janine will be monitoring them during the session, and after each slide, she will make sure that I will answer any question that you have, or we can have a discussion on a certain topic, because the idea of this whole session is to make sure that we give you as much information as we can on how to really look into resilience and how we are looking as a Deloitte into really reimagining resilience. Because if you really think about it, resilience is not something new. It's like what cyber was 5 years or 10 years ago as a buzzword is certainly now with the pandemic becoming resilience as a buzzword. And I think also the past 1.5 years has demonstrated the importance of resilience in the face of all the risks, not just the pandemic, but also recent other issues that have happened besides the pandemic, where we see that resilient leaders within the financial services industry really need to plan out in ahead for disruption, adapt, endure, but also be able to rebound in a way that enables you all not to only succeed, but to really lead a way in the new and better normal. Because the disruptions over the last 1.5 years has really taught us the importance of not only the cross-functional strategic resiliency, and the early interventions around that, but also to a degree of how resilience exists at all levels. And how we look at that really from a Deloitte perspective is, how can we reimagine resilience? And how can we support organizations, but how you need to start thinking as an organization about how to build a resilient organization as a priority for you. And not just because of the pandemic, but also with all the other things that are happening around the world. Increase of cyber attacks, more dependencies on the supply chain. And because the last 50 months have given us an insight into what can really happen, we really try to help you think about how to become resilient and how to make sure that this is part of you. So with that, it's good to look into, as you see here also, for organizations to really look into resilience more from a broader perspective. And look at it from not only an operational or a financial resilience perspective, but look at resilience from a social, but also an infrastructure, looking into what is specific for your sector, as well as for your whole organization, but for your operations, and even what is your employee resilience. To make sure that it's top of mind across each layer of your organization and across each discipline, to really create efficiencies, but also flexibility, and be as an organization more adaptable for any disruption that can happen. Because in the end, if you are not being very reactive, but being proactive in this and have this top of mind across everything you do on a daily basis, across people, data, technology, operations, your ecosystem, but even from a brand and reputation perspective, you as an organization are able to better thrive and take this more as a competitive advantage, taking it forward. So during today's webcast, we really are going to make sure that we talk to you about the different challenges, the uncertainties that it brought us, but also how you can make sure you are prepared. As right now, 2021 is really an inflection point. This is the moment for you to really start focusing on this. And not only because of the regulatory push, but also because the recent events has made sure to highlight that most of the organizations are not ready for a disruption. And so we hope that in the next few minutes we can go over that. If we can move to the next slide. So if we are looking into how to look into resilience and how to reimagine it, is that a resilient organization needs to be not only thriving after, but really thriving before, during, and after an adversity. And as I mentioned, more resilient organizations, if you have it all in place, are able to draw on reserves, pivot quickly, and respond positively to any disruption that happens. They display also more strong financial, operational, and reputational resilience. It also opposes the right mindset, strong leadership, transformative approach of risk management, and really more of a holistic point of view, which will help in the end, as a result, organizations to endure any disruption more with a success. So this is the right time to really reimagine your resilience as an organization. The impact of COVID shows where you have resilience and where you have vulnerabilities. So this is the moment to consider what are those changes that you would like to make to enhance your resilience as an organization and new ways of operating. By specifically addressing that across 3 pillars into our point of view as Deloitte: financial, operational, and reputational resilience, you will make sure that your organization is more set up for any uncertainties in the future. And establishing indicators for resilience for each of these pillars enables you to measure and maintain your resilience as an organization for the long term. Improve transparency and governance over what really keeps you resilient. So if you look into this, what we believe as Deloitte is really what will help you, besides looking into resilience across 3 pillars, financial, operational, and reputational resilience, is also looking to resilience by how you approach it. Resilience by design. So have you really, as an organization, have a foundation how to adapt and respond proactively to any distress, any issue, any stress or shocks that happen? How resourceful is your organization? Is your organization set up in their foundation to be able to do that? But great if you have that. But then you also need to make sure that that doesn't compromise resilience to change. Where your organization really needs to make sure that you can ongoingly be able to respond. So with any disruption that happens or any changing circumstance, how is your business model able to adapt any disruption? Or is your business model in the current situation able to adapt to the new normal? And how can you take that resiliency as more of a competitor's advantage. Not just by only responding to when an incident happens, but making it part of your day-to-day business and how you take risks, how to learn from all the lessons that you had, how to proactively look into resilience via, for instance, sustainability. And certainly if you're looking into ESG, how can you make sure that you can use that part of resilience or your supply chain as an advantage to be resilient in the market? And then last but not least, resilience in adversity. Your organization can be totally crisis ready. Are you able to quickly also mobilize, be flexible, change around your way of working, your earning model? How can you make sure that you have that adaptability to have a sort of a robust command center, communication capabilities, to change around and adapt where possible across your resources, your processes, your technology, if any disruption happens?
And Steph, I have a way this, for example, would have recently interfaced with people in this community would be Bitcoin's price went way down, and lots of people have, you know, bots, for example, that will try and buy and sell at certain margins. But all of a sudden, if the market, you can't sell what you have or you can't get enough of what you need, how do you adapt to that? And then you're going to have customers who are looking to take money off your platform, and they're looking to buy Bitcoin when the price is low and they're trying to buy the dip. And sometimes you know, platforms aren't responding quickly enough. And one of the things about crypto is it's supposed to be not slow like the banking system. So this is an example of an external force that's coming at you, and how are you responding, and are you being resilient when these massive market forces all of a sudden are hitting you?
And thank you, that's a really good example. Before I move on, any questions? So as I mentioned on the left side of the slide, really, how do you look into resilience? I already quickly mentioned look into resilience from a financial, operational, and reputational perspective. And it's maybe good to know why did we pick those things? Because from a financial perspective, it's not just looking into a strong balance sheet, but also really looking into what are clear contingency options for funding. What could be, how do you need to look into your liquidity or capital management? But also from a financial perspective, do you need to look into a strategy point of view of looking into what is really the core of your business? Do you maybe need to, via merger or via selling a certain part of your organization, make sure as an organization you become more resilient for any disruption? If you're looking into this more from an that you really need to, what are your vulnerabilities there, and how can you make sure that you're set up for success? If you then move more to the operational resilience part, it can be how can you make sure that sufficient diversity, but also redundancies and resourcefulness alongside with sort of a proven capability to respond and adapt to adverse events or disruptions and changes in the market are there in place? How can you make sure that your whole operation, looking into your supply chain, looking into your technology, is all set up to make sure that they can handle any disruption that has happened, but also that they're able to recover, that they continue business as usual? And the last one is one that a lot of organizations forgot, but certainly with the pandemic, but also some of the crises that over the last period of time happened, you see this more and more coming into the agendas of senior leadership and the board. Reputational resilience. How can you make sure that you're also resilient from a reputation perspective, from a brand to reputation perspective, but also looking into the regulatory part, looking into ESG sustainability resilience? How, as an organization, can you make sure you establish a reputation based on the consumer and social expectations that are there? So let me pause there and see if there are any questions until now. And if not, I would love to move to the next slide. So if we are talking about resilience, as I just mentioned, and for us, a resilient organization is looking into those three components: financial, operational, and reputational resilience. What does a resilient organization really look like? And what do you need to take into account? So our definition and views are based on findings also that we've done recently on a global survey, where we surveyed 2,000 CXOs, which was aimed to really better understand how organizations cope with unexpected challenges. And certainly the ones over the last 12 to 15 months, but also in general, since 2008 when the financial crisis happened. And the common characteristics that companies have on how to weather these impacts. And we see there are 5 interconnectivities that have been emerged there. If you're looking into this, we're looking into prepared, the organizations that those who are looking specific actions to better weather this disruption, being adaptable, having a workforce that is really flexible, and especially trained to be operating in uncertainties. Collaboration, being collaborative, by not only removing the silos, where we see a lot of organizations, especially in financial services, working, but also increase the speed of decision making, and really looking across their broader ecosystem. Trustworthiness, really the willingness to trust between leaders, employees, but customers. How can you increase the trust across that ecosystem? Because purpose is also part of trust. And what is really the responsibility? How can you be responsible? Believing that your organization believes in something beyond just the bottom line. And a resilient organization is really looking into that. So to also give you some highlights of what came out of this survey, what we want to move is, if there are no further questions, to move into the next slide, where we have a polling question for you. And then I will also shine some light on some questions that we got from the organization. So it would be great if you could respond to your polling question, and then we can take it from there. Let me give everybody a few minutes to respond. And Jade, here you need to help me with the fancy polling way of Zoom. Oh, we already get the pop-up. So great to see some of the responses that you have. And I'm also very surprised that that so many organizations really feel that they are really set up for success in case of any disruption. Certainly, if we're moving to the next page, what you will see here is what came out of that survey. So when we did that survey worldwide across 2,000 CXOs, what we really saw is that 70% of the CXO survey said they don't have a complete confidence in their organization's ability to pivot or adapt to a disruptive event. And it was really interesting to see that across the whole survey, which of course is publicly known, so I can share that after the session, of course, with everybody if that's up to your interest. It was very interesting to see the global findings that came across in 3 themes. One of them is really that resilient organizations outperform in times of disruption, that is really what people said that it should be, but that most of them didn't feel that their organization was really set up for success, while these were Forbes 500 type of organizations. And that really that 2020 accelerated resilience for some, but also exposed a lot of gaps for most of them. And last but not least, that resilience deliberated. Leaders of resilient organizations understand now that these traits aren't always there. And it really requires a desire, effort, and investment, but also really a culture of activating and cultivating, but even maintaining resilience as an organization.
And Steph, can I just want to point out one thing here that I'm seeing is, there's a big divergence in how this group feels that they are resilient versus those in the survey. So I think that's something for everyone to reflect on and explore a bit more. And when you're saying that these are somewhat larger organizations who responded, I think one of the things that having increased regulation does is it makes organizations larger. So if people on the call are looking to complete their IIROC registration, your company's probably going to hire a bunch of people, is what's going to happen in order to meet those demands. So I think as we go through here, Steph, all the things that you're going to point out and what needs to be in a business continuity plan might be quite illuminating for those on the phone. So thank you. Back to you.
No problem. Are there any questions until now? If not, then I think let's suggest to move on to the next page. So what we want to do is during this session, like we just explained, the resilient organization. Why is resilience so important for you as an organization? The components that we think are part of a resilient organization. We would like to zoom in now specifically on operational resilience. And why do we want to zoom in on operational resilience? Because over the next 60 minutes, we want to have a discussion with you on making sure how are you set up with the changing environment in financial services, which you all of course belong to really make sure you're adaptable. And to also really make sure that if any disruption is happening, your business can continue as usual. Because with, as Jenny mentioned in the beginning, with the IIROC coming with new requirements for everybody who's under their supervision of a business continuity plans, we would like to make sure that you have at least an idea, why is it now so important? Why are we focusing on it now? What is the complexity? What are also industry perspectives? And from there, where do we see where some of you have business continuity plans in place, disaster recovery plans in place, even maybe operational resilience? Why we have seen over the last 1 year really shift from the traditional way of looking into resilience, how you really need to think about this as resilience 2.0. And what are things as an organization you can start doing to make sure you can take that into account. So as we all know, a lot of organizations are facing a lot of complex issues over the last period of time. And global markets are getting more complex. There are more independencies and dependencies on services. And there's an increased threat from a cyber perspective. Certainly now within COVID times, what we have seen is that for it has been increased almost 50% of the cyber attacks that are happening. And I think even the Colonial Pipelines recently, or the Irish Health Services, or even the Washington DC Police are few. And then I'm not even referring to some of the cyber attacks that maybe we are aware of that are not publicly known, but we were able to just make sure that it didn't come out or to prevent from happening. So there's a growing change in industry. And that growing change of industry is because of the pandemic. It's because of the complexity, the ongoing changing landscape, the ongoing changes in customer expectations, the additional stress factors that are coming as civil unrest, as I mentioned, the cyber things, but also the change of how ecosystems work together and then dependencies there on each other across an ecosystem and the partnerships. So what is now really, why is it now so important? Operational resilience as resilience is not new. But because operational resilience makes sure that organizations and financial institutions and financial market infrastructures are able to prevent, respond, recover, but also learn from any disruption, it can also help really make sure that it doesn't impact your customers, employees, and the financial markets that much. And also how you can make sure that your business processes can continue and services and products can continue as usual, how you have designed. And with these growing changes in industry, what we really see is just not a single service perspective. We really recommend organizations when they look into resilience to look across their ecosystem, their third parties. Look into how resilience also looks into how they interact with their customers. How you can really look into how to innovate and be more upfront and proactive in that. And I see a question popping up. Do you want me to answer it right now?
Yeah, let's start and talk about that.
So how do you stay financially resilient is one of the questions if you're a cryptocurrency exchange. In a new and the new regulation has been implemented in a region which restricts 90% of your user base from buying cryptocurrency. So how you can be resilient is make sure that, of course, you need to be compliant with your regulations. There's always a good thing when regulations are coming up, is to make sure that you are in front of that. So that's also that proactive way of looking into resilience. We don't have it here yet so much in Canada, but what I can give you as an example is some of you have heard, there are just recently, and I will come to that later, has been released new guidelines for the banking industry from a Basel perspective. And I will come to the cryptocurrency part there in a minute, where you will see that for regulatory perspectives, part of being resilient is make sure you're advanced in ahead of the regulation or the local regulation that's coming. So start making sure that you are already in advance knowing which regulation is underway, which consultation papers are underway, and how can you, and maybe as the CBC collectively, have discussion with the regulators in advance for the final publications to make sure your point of view has come across and that you show the regulator, who is sometimes more from a theoretical base, to really be advanced in this and make sure that you are able to show the practicalities of how this works and how it will limit your market and your industry.
Yeah.
And oh, sorry, Janine, you maybe also want to add something there.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the other things that I found in the cryptocurrency space is that not everybody, but some aren't aware of regulations that are coming. So part of it is having the bandwidth and enough people to be observing the regulatory environment for you so you can be aware of what's coming. The CBC has done roundtables in the past with various regulators to make sure that the voice of this community is being heard and seen. But a big part of it is understanding fully the regulations that are out there and not assuming it won't apply to you in crypto. There's a lot of that where people have been, quote, surprised, but maybe for others it was clear to them that it always would have applied to them in crypto and that it's not different than, say, a traditional broker dealer, for example, would be treated. So there's a lot of being able to scan and understand your entire regulatory landscape, because it can literally stop you from operating if you're not in compliance, like Steph was saying. So if you're multi-jurisdictional, so that's why I was curious which region got restricted, but one of the options that you have is operating within multiple jurisdictions. So that way, if part of your user base does get restricted, your company's not basically down to 10% of its user base. So some of our clients do operate in multiple jurisdictions, which means there's actually a whole other set of regulations though. So while you do give yourself a wider breadth of users who can use your services, you then have a second set of regulatory requirements and a burden that you have to comply with. So I know it sounds onerous, and it is, but you're dealing with regulators who feel they're protecting the public. And so one of the ways to help them understand how your business works is engaging as much as possible with when opportunities to comment come out, when there are roundtables. I know there's some of us at CBC, for example, who have commented on some things that have come out and gathered basically together as a group to comment back to the regulator from the perspective of the cryptocurrency industry. So those are some of the ways that you can hopefully not have your entire user base restricted, but definitely engaging with regulators and having them know who you are and working with them in a cordial manner is definitely a very good idea, especially in this space where there isn't a great, as high of a level of knowledge as I would say like a traditional market. So there's a lot there. Does that answer your question?
Assuming that it did, and otherwise, I see already a yes.
Great, thanks.
So continuing that discussion of why this is important, I think one of the points we just already caught up, there are global regulators, but there are also local regulators are really getting an increased focus more on the operational resilience part, which will also affect your financial resilience part. But we also see that the changing customer and market demand really make sure that you need to have 24/7 access to all the capabilities that your customers or the market demands. And how can you make sure that your organization is able to adapt if anything happens? Where you saw more traditionally, where there were maybe backups made every 2-3 days, where you're now seeing organizations moving forward to really make real life backups. You see data vaulting coming ahead. So if any disruption happens, the recovery time is so much easier. So both from a market and customer perspective, there's lesser impact. And you can make sure that internally you maybe really need to make sure that your organization needs to do a lot, but the market and your customers are not impacted and there will be less issues there. So less disruption in the overall ecosystem. But I see that Jean-Francois has joined us, who was able to get out of the crisis meeting that he needed to be in. So before I continue, Jean-Francois, anything to add from your end?
No, thanks, Stephanie. I joined in the middle of the slide, so don't want to interrupt, sorry.
Sorry, Steph, you're on mute.
Sorry, then something happened. I pressed on mute. My apologies there. I think that's also the buzzword recently that everybody's using the last year. So as we discussed in the beginning, really why is important, and let me repeat it before we continue, it's really the complex market, the landscape that is there, the interconnectivities that we have across the ecosystem, really looking to the third parties. What we just also mentioned, and we'll go in a little bit later more, is looking at it from a regulatory perspective. Always dependencies and the services you want to give to your customers in your market, and avoid as much as possible any disruptions and impacts for them, even though it increases work for you. And really making sure that because of the increased cyber threats that are happening and increased ransomware attacks that have happened, how can you make sure you prevent as much as possible? Because one thing we all know, if you're looking into resilience, you cannot prevent it. It's not so much the question of make sure that it doesn't happen. It's really the question of when will it happen? Because it will happen to all of us. Even Deloitte, could happen to. So with that, maybe if we can move on to the next page. So what I was explaining a little bit earlier when I explained the steps that we want to walk you through from a resilience perspective is really to show you where do we see resilience going? Because as I mentioned, it's not new. And what you will see here, but what I would like to discuss is really to discuss with you, what have we been seeing industry players doing over the last few years? And where do we really see that resilience is going? And where would we really recommend you to go to? And what are the key steps to take as part of that? So as I mentioned, the landscape is changing. And with that, if you're really looking into making sure you're prepared, our observations really show that you really need to look into a change of mindset, a different way of looking into your operating governance, your operating landscape. And as I mentioned, assuming disruption will happen and how to make sure you are able to adapt to that. Really look into resilience more from a broader perspective of risk, making sure you have an internal alignment across your ecosystem, making sure that you not only look at it from a silo perspective, but also work together amongst this group. That's why also this group is there. What is your sector alignment? Because as one organization alone, you cannot tackle this. Really look into this from a systematic approach, also from the broader sector, and learn and help from each other. But also, what is the role senior leadership and the board will need to start playing in becoming more resilient? How can you make sure that you have an effective governance and leadership in place to break down, for instance, those existing silos and move to operational resilience more into an overall resilience and risk management approach? So what you see there and what you see here is where you in the past really saw is that you saw organizations only looking into, for instance, mapping their processes maybe and which are critical. What you now really see is that organizations, of course, still looking into what are your critical processes that you have in an organization. But what about your critical services and products? And how are you able to map them, but also to have an end-to-end mapping of those? And how are you able to make sure that you're resilient to have them continue as usual and that they are still stable? Looking into, for instance, what you saw from a testing perspective. Most organizations have done some testing before via tabletops, and they did them annually. And those were planned way months in advance. So everybody know, okay, now that test is coming. Well, if you're not announcing them and they come like in 5 minutes and you're then able to adapt, then you're really resilient. But also really, if you're looking into what is the whole ecosystem? So not only removing the silos internally within your organization, where your work letting make sure that the cybersecurity teams, the business continuity teams, the disaster recovery are working together, but also looking into third-party risks. So how can you remove the silos not only internal within your organization, but how can you also remove the silos with working together with your third parties to be resilient? And making sure that you're resilient as a whole ecosystem. Harmonize also together your responses. Harmonize how you work together. Harmonize your testing. But also, how can you make sure as an organization, you really map all your dependencies across the organization? And not just per department, because there's so many synergies that you have. And you can be as an organization so much more effective and managing your risks better. As I mentioned, how can you get senior leadership more involved? How can you make sure you track everything that is happening from a resilience perspective? So you also have the management information to really make sure that you learn from the lessons before, that you really can adapt very quickly how you react to that. How you can use that also to ongoingly criticize yourself and see what are really our tolerances. Hey, was the tolerance that we have, was it the right one? Or do we need to revise that?
Hey, Steph, we had a question come in. So I'll just read it out for you. So for a family office crypto hedge fund with a custodial solution, for example, Ledger Enterprise solution, what recommendations would you highlight for cybersecurity resilience? So that's a pretty loaded question, first of all.
If you don't mind, Steph, I can.
Oh, you are the
can
best
take
expert
it.
there.
Yeah.
Go for it, JF.
Yeah, it's a good question. In fact, yeah, probably 2-3 things to think about. First, assuming it's a small family office, I'll look at endpoint security, make sure your endpoints are secure. So advanced detection on the endpoint, like EDR, things like that. It's kind of solution you should have. But as it's always a matter in terms of cyber of time to happen, it's when rather than if. You need to prepare to detect and react properly. So invest in some detection capabilities, nothing sophisticated, but you need to be able to detect it quickly and as well as respond capabilities. So when will happen, who will do what, when. So having some playbook to respond to that. And ransomware is the kind of situation that happens a lot those days. So preparing for ransomware, data leakage are probably the two kind of events that your family office should be prepared for in terms of having some preventive mechanism, as I mentioned, on the endpoint, as well detection, but certainly respond capability. Some like two playbooks, one ransomware, the other one data leakage. Hope it answers your question. So Steph, you want to continue on that?
Thank you.
Good. Before I continue, because I was almost done with this slide, do you have anything to add from your perspective?
No, I think you touched the right points here.
So with that, if we can move on to the next page. So we have been talking about how to make your organization more resilient from an operational resilience perspective. And to help you a little bit, what we thought was good to do is to really show you what are things you can think about to really start building a resilience program for your organization. And you see on the right side, as you see, it's really about the interconnectivities, and it's interconnectivities across multiple things. It's interconnectivities about the different disciplines that we see as part of operational resilience. As I just mentioned, a big key part that a lot of organizations forget is third-party risk management. Because if you normally look into resilience, you see organizations looking into maybe the operational risks, they look into cyber and information security, they will look into business continuity, disaster recovery, they will look into incident and crisis management. But the key things that we really see to remove those silos and to work better as an organization is to make sure that you also look into the data. You look into your physical security, your third-party risk management, but also really about your operations, your workforce. Because without your people, you're not able to do anything. You can have great technology in place, but you need to have everything in place in a sort of a circle to make sure your operation is resilient. And for you to start looking into what should your governance look like, but also really what is the risk appetite of the organization on resilience? What are really the tolerances that you have as an organization for disruption? What are really scenarios that could happen to your organization? Certainly with crypto being a little bit different than some of the other organizations of scenarios that could happen. And how are you able to adapt to those different scenarios? And what could be scenarios that you have? How can you test that on an annual basis? And not only with tabletops, but really also with how can you test your systems? How, as an organization, can you make sure that you monitor everything? How can you make sure you have the right management information, the right KPIs, KRIs in place? To also look into what is the steering information to make your organization more resilient, the continuous improvement. But most of all, it will require a lot of change management of how you operate as an organization. Who is responsible for resilience? And how you can best take that into account. Because it's not just a single discipline alone. Because if you only look at it from a one-way view, that is the biggest weakness. That's the biggest vulnerability of an organization. And what we have seen for a lot of organizations, if you bring everything together, it aligns more with most of the organization's strategy. It gives you a lot of efficiencies. And in the end, in the future, even some reductions in cost. So use resilience, as I mentioned before, to end the loop as your competitive advantage.
And Steph, I have a quick question around third-party risk management. For the industry-wide test in October, I thought maybe when we were talking about it, it did include third parties as well? I was just wondering if you could confirm that or not.
So we will come to that a little bit later as well.
Okay.
But what will happen when the test is done? So I will explain a little bit of the test for the people who are not knowing what the test is. And maybe we can quickly flip to that page. That makes it a little bit easier if we can go to the next slide. And the one directly after this one.
Perfect. Yeah.
And I will change a little bit then around also our discussion.
Back one.
So, oh, sorry. Can we go one back? My apologies.
Yeah, that one.
Perfect. So what I want to, we will change a little bit of the order, but as we mentioned in the beginning, there's a lot of regulatory change coming. And that is that we see already globally happening, where in Europe, Australia, there have been a lot of regulation coming. As some of you also know, in 2019, the first regulation came, or not so much regulation, but Austria, as one of the regulators, started publishing really their point of view in their strategic plan of how to improve your organization's resilience from a financial risk perspective, but also the preparedness from an operational and non-financial risk perspective. You see in Europe, you see the Basel Committee for the banking sector specifically coming up with operational resilience principles. There even have been some consultation papers, and by Q3 also some consultation papers are expected here, and a letter of the industry by the end of 2021. But what also happened is that by last December, just before Christmas, IIROC had published a notice where most of you who are already IIROC regulated, and some of you who want to become IIROC regulated, have gotten a message also individually from them. That part of their regulation and their supervision on October 23rd, they want to ask all of their members, or at least all of them in scope, to participate in a mandatory business continuity stress test. And really the idea behind this is to emphasize the importance of an organization to be resilient for any disruption that is happening, and to continue their business as usual, at least from a process and services perspective. Maybe with a lot of workarounds, but that needs to be in place. And to also test that you can have great plans in place, because you can put everything in writing. But as you all know, if your employees are not trained to handle them, if there's not an awareness of how to work with that, if they're not really implemented and able to be executed, then you have nothing. And this is, of course, a stress test that is announced, but it's also announced because they have also mentioned we want to make sure that all our members are able to prepare, because not all of our members have business continuity plans in place. Not all of our members have ever done a business impact assessment, where you really look into what are our critical processes, what are our critical services, and what are the tolerances that we allow around it. And here comes also that point in consideration. If you as an organization need to be able to continue business as usual, how are you able to do that if you're dependent on some of your third parties? So while preparing for this stress test, and while the stress test will be performed on October 23rd, on that Saturday, how can you make sure that you as an organization are able to address any disruption across your full ecosystem? So as part of this, and as part of the simulation trading exercise that they want to do, it's the dealer membership, but it's also the service providers to test this together. So what will happen, as I mentioned, is the members will be asked to join this industry-wide stress test. And that stress test has 3 stages that they want to do. So really an exercise on the incident response plans that organizations have in place, for you to really gain insights of, are they efficient, are they executable, are they effective, but also how is your response into that, and what are really the areas of improvement for you. look at it also from a crisis management perspective. So do you have crisis command centers in place? Or how are you organizing your crisis management? Do you have playbooks? Do you have a communication plan? Do you have all the stakeholders that need to be involved? Are they prepped and are there protocols in place? And even scripts of what needs to be done, in which order? And then, of course, the exercise really from a trading perspective of the test of in production and with the data, but also what are the tests from a disaster recovery perspective?
And Steph, I want to give an example here for people. So, for example, in this industry, you don't have, like, say, a central bank giving you liquidity. You've got liquidity providers within the crypto industry. So depending on who you use and how you interact with them, if you were to participate in this stress test, they are one of your third-party providers. Also, your wallet or your cold storage potentially providers, or if you maybe you've got some hot storage at a provider like BitGo or Coinbase or Gemini or someone like that, how did they roll into your testing on this industry-wide test day? So I would assume most people have not gone through an industry-wide test before in the crypto industry, and so maybe those relationships with those partners, those need some work. So it's not just that day in October, there's a lot building up to this. I mean, Steph, I think it's relevant for this group to explain that, you know, some clients we're working with to do a stress test or a comfort letter. Sorry, of course, I forgot to mute my stupid phone and it's going crazy as soon as I go off mute. You know, this is a many month process. Like, this is starting now to be ready for October. So just want to impress the seriousness and the amount of work that goes into this. So JF, I see you're off mute.
Yes, I agree, and I want to echo your comment, Janin, on that. It's a lot of work to prepare for those kind of tests, especially if you never been through that. Coming from within an industry background in FSI, I work for 2 banks where I had to deal with those tests, so it requires a lot of effort, needs some planning, and especially if you don't have some minimal things in terms of business continuity plan and so on, it's just adding on top of your preparation. So really important to think about now, and especially that summer is coming. So if you want to enjoy your summer, start working on that now.
And that's also what we will go in a little bit more in detail. But if there are no questions here, let's go to a few polling questions on where you think you are. And from there, we will take it and then list also some of the ideas that you can do, but also how we really look into our framework of business continuity that can maybe help you in what other things you need to think about to really get ready. So polling question number 2. Does your organization have a business continuity program in place? 50% say yes, 17% says no, and there are 33 that say partially. So I think they're good that already 50% have them in place. Really good for yourself to, as an organization, think about, okay, I have business continuity plans in place, but really what do I then have in place? And Jeff will quickly, after the third polling question that we'll have here, go a little bit about what you can think about our business continuity framework and what are things you all need to consider to do to be really resilient as part of your business continuity program. So if we could go to the second question. Does your organization perform business impact assessments to identify critical processes and services? Whoa, impressed that 100% says yes. Certainly, as a lot of the people in the group here have reached out to us before saying, can you help us with business impact assessments? But really good that the response is so positive and that so many people are already prepared. That really will help you to be also ready for the next steps. So if you move to the next slide. And there is some delay.
Yeah. So here's a framework. That's an example of framework that could help you building your business continuity and crisis management capabilities. A lot of box on the screen. Seems very complicated, but essentially it's 2-3 key steps that you need to be aware of when preparing your business continuity program. First, as we just mentioned with the last question, business impact analysis. So understanding what is critical. So analyzing your organization, determining what your critical activities, business services are, any interdependencies for those business services in terms of technology for sure, third parties as well, but obviously people are very important as well to consider. And then once you set up that, you identify what is your scope, your critical business services, what you should absolutely maintain to continue your operation, then you start preparing your plan and your strategy to recover, looking at recovery strategy, building your plan, could be a business continuity plan, disaster recovery plan for the technology aspect of it, and also considering building your crisis management framework to handle any type of crisis that could happen into your organization, and exercise your organization related to that, which is the third step, which is implement. So once you put in place your plan, you train on it and exercise, and this is a continuous effort to do that, as it's really important. A lot of organizations realize that when they suffer disaster. A good example is COVID. Many organizations had a pandemic plan since few years, never exercised that plan, never updated. So when COVID hit, they were not ready. Nobody know exactly what to do. Technology was not ready as well in some cases in terms of VPN access or remote working capability. So those are good examples why it's really important to exercise and test on a regular basis. So I don't want to overcomplicate that slide. A lot of stuff, but essentially 3 things to think. So determine the scope, your critical activities, prepare your recovery strategies and your plan, thinking about facilities, technology, people, your supply chain as well, and then implement and test it on a regular basis. So if we can flip to the next slide. Just to check if you are prepared. So we identify here related to the stress test from IIROC. If you are ready, we identify a few key steps, and maybe Steph, you want to jump on that and go over the 5 key steps to make sure that people are ready.
Yes, so if you currently already have, as most of you have, as based on the polling, already a business continuity management framework or program in place, have a look, really think about, is it still up to date? Do I really have those silos removed? And is there a lot of interconnectivity from a business continuity, disaster recovery, crisis management, cyber perspective, data, and update that, but also the roles and responsibilities that you see, the tolerances that you have. So that you really also have everything well set up. We always recommend that if your business impact assessments that you do across each of your business units in scope, if they're older than 1 year, please make sure you do one again over the summer. And to make sure with that you in step 3 really update your business continuity plans that you maybe already have in place. And if you currently don't have those yet, start with those business impact assessments and then start updating your business continuity plans. Because we see a lot of organizations, even in industry here, that they maybe update every 2, 3, 4 years their business continuity plans, because I think not so much has changed. But certainly with the recent stress tests we have done with some other organizations, we have seen that a lot of them are outdated. And key will be to make sure that it is all up to date before your stress test itself. And then what we always recommend is try to simulate a stress test. Try to work together within your organization or ask an external vendor to help you simulate the stress test to make sure you're fully prepared. You still have time to look into what are your vulnerabilities and what are your gaps, and how can you make sure you can improve them before October 23rd. And last but not least, ask for help. Work together as a sector. Work together across this group to be prepared, to share lessons learned with each other. And the one that already Janine has mentioned, besides the stress test, if you're currently in your application track for registration for IIROC, there is a big chance that you will be asked to get a sort of a comfort letter on the maturity of your business continuity compared to industry standards. So make sure you really update these things, even though you maybe are not yet part of the stress tests that need to happen on October 23rd. Make sure you are prepared, and make sure you also are prepared to get that comfort letter. But with that, Janine and Jeff, if you have anything to add, let me know. And otherwise, I think I will open it up for all the questions.
I guess the only thing I was thinking about the comfort letter, Steph, in case people aren't really familiar with it, just a little bit what's involved to get the comfort letter so that people can understand like the timeline and how much work is involved.
So it depends, of course, what type of comfort letter has been asked by IIROC, because each organization is asked at a different level. Also, that depends on your type of organization. But there are different types of comfort letters. There are comfort letters where they will really ask for an external vendor to do a sort of an assessment where you currently are and ask to send that comfort, hey, they are at least in baseline at an industry best practice for minimal viable option. There is another way that is just make sure that a vendor has assessed where you are so that the organization itself can say, hey, we have done the assessment, these were our gaps, these are the plans that we have to address it, and that's it. So it really, there are two examples of type of comfort letters that can be asked. It depends really on your application and the type of organization that you have of what is specifically going to be asked.
Thank you. JF?
No, nothing to add there at this point.
So if you go back maybe to the question slide, if there are any questions, please raise them so we can make sure that we can answer all of yours, and to give you a good idea of how you can become more resilient.
Don't be shy. Actually, I don't mind, Jade, that you did have up our contact info as well, because if people don't want to ask in the group, it's totally fine to reach out and ask some questions. But I guess one of the things that I would like the group to take away is that because you're getting regulated, or if you're looking to get regulated, engage with any of that kind of stuff, there's just a whole world of other things to think about when it comes to a compliance perspective, and the things the regulators might be looking for. So if you don't come from a capital markets background yourself, potentially in prior roles or where you might have had to actually participate in something like this, there's definitely quite a lot to learn. So I really think that, oh, great. Mahmoud has a question about how can we add resilience if there's a crisis with Tether? Good question. That's the biggest risk that keeps you up at night. So just for JF and Steph, so Tether is a stable coin, which basically mirrors, like they have the same amount of US dollars in the bank as what's on the blockchain. So for example, if Tether went down and they couldn't get money off Tether's platform, they would be in trouble. So what I'm hearing, Mahmoud, is you have one provider right now, is that they're your only stablecoin provider. Is that correct? Have a couple. Okay.
So it seems that you already think to your resilience plan related to that. So I was about to mention, think about multiple provider. So if you have a couple, there's not a lot of thing that you can do as you cannot controlling the technology itself. So I cannot think of any other thing that you can think here.
So that's a good question around how IIROC views that systemic risk. So that's actually, in my mind, one of the reasons they're doing this whole industry-wide stress test, because it does include those providers, because that way it'll actually flush out if there are problems. So as more and more crypto trading platforms and the like get registered with IIROC, it will expose these kinds of things. So that's why I was saying earlier, like your liquidity providers, your wallet providers, like maybe use Fireblocks or someone, you know what I mean? Like any of kind of the industry big names I'm just trying to rattle off. If they can't make it through a stress test with you, who's actually the member who's having to get registered with IIROC, that obviously affects you, and that affects the stability of our financial system, even if we're talking about the crypto financial system. So it will, I'm sure it will make regulators nervous, and it'll have to be dealt with if it does show up to be an issue. So really planning in advance, because you know your business best and you know where your risks are, but having a way to mitigate those before you even kind of get forced into an industry-wide test, I think is a really good way to go to think about it. So Steph or JF, over to you for any more thoughts on that, on how IIROC would view that risk.
The only thing, and it's not related necessarily to how IIROC view that risk, but it's more for you to properly document your rationale behind your resilience plan on that. So your assessment regarding what is critical for you, as we mentioned, the BIA, seems that you already identified that. Recovery strategy, you have multiple providers and so on. So put that on paper, because I suspect that probably it's not on paper, not part of your plan. If it is, perfect. If it is not, if it's not, it's time to act on it. That don't seems to be very a lot of effort to do that for your organization. So so that's my advice for you.
I'm pretty sure, I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure IIROC requires you with your registration to have a chief compliance officer. So this is something, for example, that would be under your chief compliance officer's remit to make sure that is done. So there's going to be all kinds of layers of compliance and regulation that will wind through into your business continuity plans. All right, thank you for that question. That was great. Anybody else have any other questions? I can't see, like, it's not like we're texting and I can see anybody's typing, so I'll just have to pause and wait and see. Maybe while we're waiting here, JF or Steph, just want to see if there's anything else you wanted to throw out there based on some of the questions or anything else that's come to mind.
No, I think what I saw from the polling, great if you already have things in place. The key thing, what Janine also mentioned, if you don't, please make sure you start as soon as possible. As it maybe seems, oh, I quickly need to update a business continuity plan. Oh, I quickly need to update an assessment. But the effort that goes into it to really do these things in detail, as some of you know, is a lot of time. And with the summer period coming up, we have seen a lot of organizations already trying to plan it out and struggle. So please have a look into that and make sure you're well prepared for the stress test. It can only help you as an organization. And I know everybody's already swamped, and this will be something extra on the side of everybody's desk. But my recommendation is to really start looking into it now.
And I think that's a good point about the amount of time, and it's coming up on summer, because I don't know about you guys, but we're all sick of COVID. We want to have the best summer ever. And so maybe that means people aren't just going to be tied to their desks all the time this summer. And if you're trying to get ready for the stress test, is your team available? Or if you need to go get help from a provider, do they even have staff to help you? So those are the kinds of things that I would suggest taking a look at here as we're getting much closer to October, because a lot of the ones we've been talking about stuff, like they're starting now, like, or they've already started. So this is a fairly long process to make sure that you're sitting in a good place. And I guess the other thing I would say is, I mean, I know this whole industry is starting to get regulated by IIROC, and so there's going to be learnings along the way for all. You definitely want to put your best foot forward, right? And there's going to be a level of learning back and forth. And so you know your business better than anyone else. So if you can really document and show why it's this way or it will be resilient, I think that would really help when you're engaging with the regulator to really show them how serious you are, and that you can be a trusted part of the broker-dealer network, for example. So, all right, Andrea, are public exchanges like Binance, Coinbase, and others exposed to potential shutdown with this stress test? So they're third parties in this, JF.
Yeah, potential shutdown. You mean, I guess you mean in terms of losing their license, or shut down in terms of outage? Not sure to get the question here.
Andrea, do you mind telling us which you mean? Like when you say shut down, do you mean as like
A license?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I doubt. I've dealt with IIROC many years. Usually they will put you some remarks where you'll have like action plans to go over. So if any of those organizations, Coinbase or Binance, have some issues with the stress test, they will have action plan to go over and to address. If they are not addressing those issues within a certain time frame, then yes, it could come to losing their license. But if it's happened, it's because there are probably a lack of seriousness in the organization, which I doubt that it will happen. I never saw that. So
Perfect. All right, anybody else?
Okay.
All right, well, this will be on YouTube, Jade, like you said. So this is also our info here as well. Please feel free to connect with us if you have any additional questions. We're happy to have a call, and the recording will be available. So Jade, I will pass it back to you for the wrap up.
Excellent. That was a great conversation. And thank you, Stephanie and Jean-Francois and Janine, for sharing your knowledge today. Deloitte's a big part of the Canadian Blockchain Consortium. We appreciate your support. And yes, this will be posted tomorrow. And I'd also like to give a shout out to next week's webinar, which is the Canadian Blockchain Association for Women, the CBA. They are going to be discussing the opportunities for women in crypto, blockchain, NFT. So that will be a good one. The time is changing. It is going to be from 1 to 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So once again, Stephanie, Janine, Jean-Francois, thank you very much for your time today. And I hope you all enjoy your day. And I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jake.
Bye.
Bye-bye.